the unveiling of the company of heaven. Every man and every woman is a star.
I am Eric Scott Picard, one of your co-hosts for this evening, joined as ever by Patrick Ryan. Now tonight we have got a repeat guest for you, and I think you're going to enjoy it because we certainly enjoyed our last conversation. We've got Dr. Bones back in the house, ladies and gentlemen, although not really in our house. He's in the Conjure House down there in Florida. So Dr. Bones, if you do not recall, is a journalist and a practitioner of the Southern traditional conjure. He's an occultist and a political thinker. He writes for Disinformation. We're going to talk about his latest ongoing series, Gonzo and Conjure 2016, which has been covering the campaign trail, and you've probably seen on Free Radical Media. Also, he is a writer for Gods and Radicals and is the founder of the aforementioned Conjure House. He's also featured in the Journal of Gods and Radicals, their latest issue of their Journal of Beautiful Resistance, Volume 2. So without further ado, Bones, how are you doing, sir?
Fantastic, sir. Glad to be back.
It's good to have you. It's good to have you. And even in these last months that we haven't spoken, you have been up to all kinds of things. I see your name all over Disinformation, for example. We've been trying to share your latest series, which I think is a pretty interesting ongoing series about the current United States political campaign.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, one of the things I remember, submitting stuff for Disinfo, and I watched the Republican debates one night, and I just could not believe what I was so shell-shocked at what I was seeing that I had been reading some Hunter S. Thompson at the time. I've always been a big fan of Gonzo, and I decided to do a write-up on the Republican debates, and the editors at Disinfo got back to me and they're like, this is fantastic. And I, made a comment in that article, like if Donald Trump was made the nominee, I would make a whole series out of it. The funny thing was, as I sort of got plugged into this whole electoral madness, as an anarchist, normally I just stay away from it. But when you really sort of view it as an outsider and look at it as like this big, stupid horse race, and you can just like fully realize just how ridiculous everything is, it's really quite entertaining and shocking and disgusting and depraved, and I just wanted to bring as much of that to the forefront as I could to other people.
I think there's a lot of madness going around with this current campaign, and you've been pointing that out. Not only just the blatant absurdity of the way that the system works and has always worked, but the increasing tension with, I suppose you would say, quote unquote, normal people, right? And by that I mean people who probably don't pay much attention to politics. Mm-hmm. They're all sort of seeing the absurdity, and they're seeing how the machinery works. The curtain is getting pulled away, and you could see the people who are pulling the strings behind it more and more. And I think that's really interesting in this particular cycle.
Absolutely. One of the biggest things is in the Democratic Party. I mean, as I've watched this thing go down, and in my articles, I've detailed stolen primary after stolen primary. I mean, voter fraud in so many counties, people being turned away, entire city blocks in New York City being turned from Democrats to Republicans overnight with absolutely no explanation. Kentucky, 35 counties reported voter fraud that they could not explain, of people's party affiliations being changed, of votes with people that didn't match. And the crazy thing is, you can go to every primary where Hillary has won, okay? And every one of them is just reeking with all this stuff. And the DNC has remained completely silent about it. They've not said a single word. Meanwhile, we remember the highly contested Florida race between Gore and Bush. Oh my God! The two camps were up in arms. You thought there was maybe going to be a little bit of physical violence, but the silence is so telling. And I think that I've watched because I sort of burrowed my way into a couple Bernie Sanders groups, and I've covered a Bernie Sanders rally, and I've sort of maintained loose contacts with a local Bernie Sanders group. And I have watched the color drain out of these people's faces as you can see the gears of their heads slowly turn as they realize, oh, they were never going to let us win this. So if anything, I think it's a splendid election in the fact that on the Democratic side, you have a whole generation of millennials that are realizing that electoral politics is a sham, that they're being lied to, they're being stolen from. So you're going to burn an entire generation of people this election. They're realizing it. Not only that, with Trump, on the other hand, you have people from his campaign literally saying, we thought it was a joke too, and people ate it up. But it makes so much sense, though, and people compare him to Hitler. I don't see him as a Hitler. I do see him as the spitting image of an American Mussolini. Mussolini and the fascists did not have a political platform other than make Italy great again, and we beat up socialists. And that was good enough for the majority of the corporate entities in Italy. Even the king of Italy at the time was like, I'll throw Mussolini in position. He's just really going to answer to me. No one knew what Mussolini was really about. On the march to Rome, they asked Mussolini, one of the reporters for a newspaper, well, what's the fascist platform exactly? And Mussolini replied, well, our platform is to take power in Italy. And he just walked away. And that was it. And people ate it up. And it was only later that the doctrine of fascism and all these different ideas were ghost written by other people, and all these ideas sort of coalesced. But it was also always a very personality-driven movement. His grave is still well kept today. His granddaughter was mayor of Rome at one time. Also posed for Playboy, ironically, or strangely enough, I suppose. But he's tapping into some visceral need for, you have the majority of these sort of white Republican voting middle to lower class folks who are waking up to their dream has been stolen too. They don't see it as they don't see it the same way leftists do, that, there's this system above us that's literally stealing from us, we need to change it. They see it as, they've been led to believe it's immigrants, they've been led to believe it's this, that, or the other. But the whole thing is that it's a sort of very white bourgeois notion, I was promised success, I was promised position, I have neither. Something is wrong. Here is a man who says he's going to make this country great again. I'm going to be respected. I'm going to be feared. It's a very sort of natural thing. It's very interesting to watch it develop sociologically, but it's also not terrifying, but unnerving, definitely. It's going to be interesting to see where this goes. Absolutely.
The correlations between this political climate and the climate preceding World War II, it's a striking similarity. What do you think is the cause of it? What do you think is at the core of that?
In the U.S. or internationally?
Internationally.
Internationally, all right, I think it's pretty clear. The American Empire. All right, the United States after the end of World War II. And this is the big – people talk about the golden age of the United States, which a lot of historians agree was an absolute anomaly. Okay, we were the only post-war power that was not only victorious but had a huge manufacturing base and an army to back it up. The Soviet Union, as powerful as it was, had been bled dry. A lot of American military historians agree that at the end of World War II, it was actually the Soviets that had the deadliest fighting force at the time. But we had more technology, a greater industrial force, et cetera, et cetera. So we expanded. You have, global capitalism, then you have neoliberalism, and basically the United States owned the globe. We did what we wanted. Everyone bought we were making the laws of the planet. And unfortunately, all these people that believed in this new American century or what have you, this 1,000-year Reich of, the American Eagle, never read any history and realized that, you know, you have these forces inherent in reality. And I'm actually working on an essay right now about it, that are absolutely focused on dissolution, entropy, and breaking things apart. And they don't care where they put that energy. It just needs to happen, you know. So as the U.S. has sort of began to falter because, A, we've stretched ourselves way too thin militarily. B, we were not ready for this new level of asymmetrical warfare. You know, our military is geared towards set piece battles, mainly in Eastern Europe against 1980s Russia. You know, we are not ready for a sniper that can, you know, change his clothes and disappear, or a person that straps a bomb to his vest and just dies because he doesn't care. The U.S. Army is not made for that. We're also looking at global resource depletion. So the powers that be, the rising powers, want to grab a large stake in that. So basically it's sort of, you can look at the United States as Austro-Hungary of World War I. It's this multifaceted, very complex, held together by, you know, some loose alliances sort of empire. And you've got a lot of people that are biting at the bit underneath it that don't want to listen anymore. Saudi Arabia, Turkey. I mean, Turkey has gone off the deep end. I mean, they are this absolute crazy wild card that the U.S. cannot keep up with. They're shooting down Russian jets. They're buying ISIS oil. They're arming ISIS. They're letting them go into their hospitals. You know, the CIA cannot keep up with covering for them. Then you've got Saudi Arabia and Qatar doing this. There's this whole idea that, well, if the U.S. isn't going to do it, we're going to force them. A little while ago, you had the whole 9/11 thing where the United States said they were going to allow 9/11 victims' families to sue the Saudi Arabian government. And the Saudi Arabians said, well, if you do that, we're going to release a whole bunch of documents about how you guys weren't exactly telling the truth about 9/11. And the U.S. shut up real quick. So this is the first time you're seeing the U.S. blackmailed by its allies. So it's already weakening. You've got the rising of China. You've got Russia, which is being led by Putin, who Putin's very intelligent in that a lot of Russian documents I've seen, especially from a lot of Eurasian fascists who are close to Putin, and Alexander Dugin, who is very close to Putin, they envision Russia as sort of conquering Eurasia and being the cultural and monetary bridge between industrial China and sort of consumerist Europe. So Russia's not trying to be the world's leader, but it can see who's coming up. It's a very sort of realpolitik game with them. You know, you've got South America, which has gone almost completely red, which now you want to talk another sort of dirty war that's being kept very quiet. An unprecedented number of Venezuelan pro-government activists and military officers and politicians have been assassinated. Yeah. You have Brazil, whose recent president has been outed as an American informant who has built the only all-male cabinet in a long time in Brazil's history. So like there's all these different shadow games going on, and basically I think it is the end of American hegemony, and I think the last gasps of what you guys called post-capitalism. But I don't think it's going to enter into this age where capitalism falls apart. I think we're about to enter an even more horrific age unless something really happens. As automation leads up, you know, as 3D printing becomes more available, you know, one of the crazy things about 3D printing is, yeah, I could print out a 3D printed car, you know, for super cheap. That's fantastic. I can also 3D print an AK-47. And I can do whatever the hell I want with it. You know, it won't be long before you're able to print ammunition. You know, what do you do then? I mean, the cat's out of the bag at that point. I think the powers of the world are realizing that the United States is falling. It is retreating. They're trying to seize whatever they can, but they're also realizing that as it stands, they're in a crisis point. Just like when the Industrial Revolution happened, just like in the 30s, right after the Great Depression. Every time you have these eras where technology seems to take a huge leap and the ruling powers seem to be dying back, it's literally a scramble for whoever can come up with the best ideology and power to seize everything.
I think a lot of it, what we're going to see in the future here is this push and pull between the powerful desire for centralization and the people's desire for decentralization.
Oh, yeah.
And that goes into some of the things you were saying. You know, when you look at rising technologies and automation, 3D printing standing out very strongly among them, you see that people are trying to use these things to decentralize and to do things individually or in small groups. Whereas you see the propensity internationally is to centralize power, not solely through empire, but through global capital, multinational, international corporations, large central banks, organizations like the World Bank, okay, to centralize wealth across borders, right? But the people want to be decentralized, and I think that's where we're going to see the push and pull.
I think the one thing that is shifting in the argument, and it's a very hard thing for me to grasp, and is we're moving past a post-wealth politics. You know, wealth is basically almost completely intangible now. When you can just literally make money on a computer screen, wealth isn't tied into anything anymore. It almost becomes like a backseat system to just sort of back up and prop up already existing power structures and or ambitious people that have the blessing of the power elite. I'm not sure necessarily whether it's now about acquiring more wealth. I think the big battle, like you said, is definitely centralization versus decentralization. We have this crisis, okay, and the people at the head of it want a centralized state so they can get the planet together and they can start getting off planet. And then they have this huge dream about transhumanism and this, that, and the other. And, for the moment, at least, they still need us peons to go dig the rocks out of Mars and, come up with all these different programs and stuff like that. They still need us for now. The thing is, they are not willing. It's almost like they kind of know that there's not as much time in the game as there used to be. Like back in the 30s with the Fordist Compromise, yeah, okay, you needed to pay your guys a higher wage because you knew they would. Now it's like, okay, we've only got a set amount of time, squeeze whatever the hell you can out of these people. So the quality of living is going totally down the tubes. And this creates decentralization because these sort of precarious people are forced to intermingle amongst themselves and create these sharing networks and, different things like that to just survive, and it creates these sort of invisible networks of solidarity that are not exactly even trackable by the state. Look at the dark web. You know what I mean? Everybody's still trying to understand what this all means and everything like that, and all these different cryptocurrencies. It's definitely a titanic battle between the powers that be, the people being crushed underneath, but the overarching story for everyone is everything is falling apart and giving rise to a new age of new technologies, new ideas, and new politics. And no one knows exactly what to do with those yet.
Yeah, it's a really precarious situation, and you're right. I mean, we're leaving a lot of the structures of the 20th century behind, and I think that's mainly a good thing. Like I've argued many times that we need to move away from both capitalism and communism, okay, and move into a new transitional period. We need new ideas.
One of the interesting things that's sort of come out of not even, I would say, maybe like the post-left is the communization theory. It's a sort of like this weird hybrid strain of like insurrectionary anarchism and like pure like post-Marxist communism. Like forget everything about transitory states, forget everything about a vanguard party, forget all of that. The people seize everything. The majority of it is held in common, and there's this huge sort of anti-workerist attitude. A lot of people have been influenced by Bob Black. It definitely recalls the riots in '68 in France and the Italian Ottomanists. And all these different ideas are coalescing with a lot of individualist thought, a lot of egoist thought, a lot of Stirnerist thought that's, sort of really, now that we have the technology to sort of eliminate ourselves as workers, all of these different theories are coming to the forefront again. So I wouldn't exactly, communism as in the Soviet Union, yeah, that's gone totally, and thank God for that. Communism as in Marx, yeah, get rid of it. Totally, except for the one tiny passage where he said communism would mean that I could be a fisherman one day, and then the next day, if I wanted to, I could be a farmer, and the next day I could help run a tavern, and then in between I could talk to friends and everything like that. This sort of very like post-workerist, like our lives will be defined by experiences and projects, not commodities and markets. If we define, I would put that under communization, and I think that's still an emerging sort of nebulous theology, or not theology, but ideology that is sort of coming into its own.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's what David Graeber would call communism with a small c, is how he refers to it, to disassociate it from communism as it has been historically implemented. And I think you're absolutely right. I think a lot of people are more and more in the anarchist left being influenced by people like Bob Black. I've been trying to get Bob on the show, actually. I want to get Bob
that would be awesome.
Yeah. So I think that would be real interesting. But what do you mentioned 68 in France. You did a video not long ago, and we had a brief conversation about it, about the situation that's currently in France, widespread popular insurrection on the streets of France. And I know you have opinions about that. Why don't you talk a little bit about it?
Well, what we're witnessing, I think for us that are attuned, we must look at what's happening in France with the same sort of crawling anxiety and delicious delight that I'm sure everyone who saw the Paris Commune was feeling when the things were starting off in Russia, when the PKK put their first flag up in northern Syria. What we're seeing in France is really quite incredible. Now, I've been reading through a lot of different revolutionary texts in the 90s and everything like that. And what I'm amazed by in the 90s is like they thought the game was over. You know, like, okay, you had the Seattle riots, whatever. But there was this huge sense of like, well, I guess, all we can do is live our lifestyle, and like that's what it is. And, they could not figure out all these different things coming up. What we have in France is a nation of people that I would say have a very strong sense of rebellion about them. France's labor laws are some of the strictest. It's very difficult to fire someone, which is hard to believe as an American. Because, I work with plenty of people, I would just be like, you know what, just get out of my face, don't ever come back here again. Whereas in France, it is an extremely taking years to get someone fired. Have a very, very well-developed union presence. And France, much like Germany, was getting the neoliberal message that they needed to remain, quote, competitive. And so a socialist government, may I point out, the same kind of government that a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters would love to see in office, the same kind of socialists that promised us the world in Greece, said, well, guys, we've really got to buckle down. So we're going to cut down overtime. We're going to cut down the minimum wage. We're going to go from a 35-hour work week to a 40-hour work week. There's going to be pension cuts and all this because we have to remain profitable. And the people said no. It started out with the Come Out at Night movement. I'm not going to try to butcher it in French. But you had all these people seize the squares. And they, it was sort of like a sort of Occupy thing. People talking, people from all over different, ideologies, everything like that. What's interesting is, and some people will say, oh, no, they try to downplay it, but the truth is there, that unlike Occupy, they were not as willing to yell at or shut down violent protesters. So in these squares, you would have like the central square, which would have your typical sort of activist soup kitchen and families, and everybody's feeling good and, oh man, we can create a new society. And on the barriers, almost in a way keeping these people safe, you had the black bloc that was, violently throwing Molotovs at cops and setting up barricades and, just going full force, punching cops in the face, doing all sorts of crazy things. And this was going on, and I was watching the European news saying, oh, is this we can't allow this kind of violence. Oh, the movement's being tinged by this violence, everything like that. And yet the movement held on. And then all of a sudden, it kicked off. The oil refineries went on strike. Not a drop went in, not a drop went out. And if you want to talk about labor unions actually mattering in the modern age, it's okay, McDonald's goes on strike. Oh, man, boy, Burger King gets some more money that day. But transportation centers and energy centers, yeah, that's where you can actually still do a hurt. So first it was the oil refineries. Then the nuclear power plant refineries went on strike. And now France draws a huge amount of energy from nuclear power plants. I want to say, and I could be wrong, 60%. They went on strike. And then it went everywhere. Transport unions went on strike. Railway workers went on strike. Subway operators went on strike. Airlines went on strike. The engineers on airlines went on strike. The pilots did. Students, teachers, ports. Everybody put their hands in their pockets and said, "No, it's not happening. We're not going to go. This is not happening." The French government is pulling its hair out. It doesn't, because before, when it was just the oil refineries, they were saying, we're going to bring out troops and we're going to make these people work. It is not fair. Now, the strikes are so widespread, even the people that didn't have any allegiance to them are kind of like, because what can you do? You can't go to work. There's no gas. You have to just hang out with your neighbor who's on strike too and just talk and imagine these different lives. And everybody's sort of building out ways they can feed each other and help each other. And it's a full-blown insurrection in France. It's also one of the few times, because, in anarchist circles, we've had this idea tossed around of the general strike. It's been around since the Haymarket Massacre, and we've had a lot of people, shit all over it. Oh, well, we've never seen it work. Well, I would say what we are seeing now, because France is not Denmark. This is a fairly large company with a fairly sophisticated energy system. We're witnessing the actual success of a general strike. It requires a motivated populace. It requires a certain spirit of rebelliousness in that populace, but it can work. Where we go from here is really going to be will the French government the French government can't crack down on all these people. Will the EU? I don't know. Will this spread to other neighboring EU countries? That's a possibility. We don't know. Is this going to end in tragedy like the Paris communes? Is this going to revitalize a spirit of resistance in Europe? Quite possible. But I mean, what we're seeing in France right now is something for the history books. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a pretty incredible thing going on.
Mm-hmm.
I think... go ahead.
Oh, well, I was going to say, the one thing is, as beautiful as it is, what also makes me so sad is that, the American people used to be like that. And all it took was 200 years of domestication. And we are the most whipped, fearful, slave-like, obedient people outside of maybe Sharia law that have had the unfortunate grace to muddle about the earth. Your average American has no spirit of rebellion in him, except if maybe it's hating another sports team. He blindly goes along with everything, usually doesn't check to see if he's being lied to. And even if he is being lied to, he doesn't really care. With this whole democratic election, the election is they know that you are so powerless, they don't even have to lie to you anymore. They just, we're stealing the election. Like, what are you gonna do about it?
Right.
Well, I guess I'll just vote for someone better next year. Yeah, you're gonna do that. Yeah, you better believe you're gonna. And meanwhile in France, they're seizing workplaces. They are stopping work. They are battling the agents of the state and everything like that. And here we are, the land of the free. I mean, it's just sad. I imagine this is how a Roman fell, felt after the empire just completely collapsed, and it's just sad.
What's your opinion? I've heard it a lot, and me and Eric have talked about this quite a lot. In terms of, there's people that have been in certain conspiracy circles, for example, Alex Jones, who are coming out and actually supporting Donald Trump, the potential one true authoritarian that these people have apparently been trying to fight against. they're actually coming out and supporting him because they sort of believe he's anti-establishment, or he's going against the Masonic Zionist agenda, et cetera, whatever you want to call it.
Throw a couple of reptilians in there.
Right. What do you think that Trump is really as anti-establishment as these people say he is? I mean, because to me, it just really looks like the establishment, but without the facade covering it up.
Can I be completely vulgar here?
Yeah, go for it.
Fuck and no. This is the biggest bullshit campaign I have ever. It's at this point, it is the best theater I think. How many pictures do people need of Donald Trump shaking hands with Hillary Clinton, smiling at these private galas? How many documents do these people need of him donating obscene amounts of money to the Clinton fund? When this whole thing began, I said that Trump was going to play the foil. He was going to come out and he was just going to say all this crazy shit, and people are going to say, well, I mean, we can't let that guy win. He's crazy. I mean, no one wants Hillary, but at least she's not Trump. The only thing no one betted on was the American people being that batshit sane. Like, it's the joke that went over way too well. You know, it's like Trump walked in and was like, you know what? You know what's the problem? Alien lizards. That's the problem. And they're waiting for everybody to... And instead, everybody's like, yeah, F those lizards, man. Get them out of here. You know, the Kool-Aid is just... Right. They didn't realize that we're so far deep in the pitcher of Kool-Aid. You know what I mean? Is he... I think what's going on in Trump's mind right now, I'm not exactly sure. I think it's kind of a similar situation to where in World War I, when the Germans helped smuggle Lenin into Russia, you know, they had this idea that, yeah, he's going to take Russia out of the war. They did not expect him to, you know, seize all of Russia and then become a threat to Germany. They did not plan for that. So, I mean, it is, again, there's so many shadow games going on here. You wonder what's going on in these backroom deals. Like, is Trump kind of feeling out? Like, okay, well, I can win this. You know, is he going to bite the hand that fed him? Possibly.
And you know what? I think he will. And, you know, that's an interesting thought. You know, maybe he will want to just throw the election to Clinton. But I'll tell you this. If I was his campaign manager right now, I could get that guy elected in November. There's a very clear path to victory for Donald Trump.
Oh, absolutely.
A clear and obvious path to victory. And if, if he follows it and he does what he's been seeming to be doing, right, pulling back from some of his very blatant racist statements, okay, trying to appeal more to the center, and then the only thing he has to do is go out every day and say crooked Hillary, crooked Hillary, crooked Hillary, because she can't say anything about that because, unfortunately, it's completely true. She's one of the most corrupt Democratic candidates. Forget that. She is probably one of the most corrupt Democrats in the country.
Oh, and might we add, bloodthirsty.
Exactly.
Other UN commentators said that she was one of the major stalling processes towards the whole... In one of my articles, the sheer amount of damage that the Clinton Foundation has done to Haiti is remarkable. It is mind-boggling. The Clinton Foundation has lost billions of dollars with no explanation. They lobbied successfully the Haitian government to lower the minimum wage, and this is before the earthquake, because it would hurt, these sweatshops that were there. Almost every one of their friends and lackeys had created all these shell corporations and everything like that, and bought up massive amounts of Haitian properties, massive amounts of Haitian resource allocations. Haiti has become a Clinton debt colony. Almost like a private war chest for their political ambitions. It's shocking. She's employed after the earthquake. The Clinton Foundation threw money at a whole bunch of ex-DEA cops to go down there and train Haitian cops to shoot to kill all these looters that never appeared. Because people were too busy helping their family members. Like there's this huge sort of weird fascist angle running through there. She's completely ruined that country. And the Haitians, and again, this isn't on the American media, absolutely hate her. I actually had a Haitian friend of mine contact me and tell me about there's been massive demonstrations against Hillary Clinton in particular, about how she's robbing the country, how she's messing with their political process, how she's doing this, doing that. And the American media is completely silent. She's bloodthirsty. She's barbaric. She is power hungry. I mean, yeah, she is so dark and she's the only person Alex Jones could point out and be like, lizard person. And, I'd be like, you know what? I think you could. I think I'm starting to see the scales a little bit, now in the light and everything like that. Yeah, she's absolutely. So they went with this sort of originally clown candidate, and I think you're right. I think he's realizing, holy shit, I have a chance to win this. Now the thing is, you have to remember, just because you win the American presidency doesn't necessarily mean you get to be a cowboy and roll in there and do whatever the hell you want. We learned that with Obama. We learned that with JFK. Again, you are not.
I doubt he has any interest in actually doing anything. Let's not say that. I don't think he has any particular interest in actually being involved in policy.
I think he has. I think he has an interest in vanity, though.
Yeah, exactly.
I think he would push some, weird ass legislation. I could see something like a Trump economic zone in, some godforsaken corner of Central Asia that, he moves like in a very sort of purely personal realm. It's almost like a mafia boss. You know what I mean? In Snow Crash, there's this excellent Snow Crash, which was a novel by Neil Stephenson. Capitalism takes over, nations fall apart, and everyone sort of falls along these sort of micro corporations and everything like that. And the mafia actually incorporates, and it's a full-blown incorporation. And the head Don or whatever is talking to the guy whose actual name is Hero Protagonist, and he says, the mafia always does things in regards to personal relationships. It keeps us free from ideology. And he says, because you see, ideology is a virus. Ideology causes you to see things not as they are, but how you wish they were, and all these different things. He says, so when we do something, it's not about doing something for a larger goal or a sort of ideological standpoint. It's a person-to-person thing. It's a favor, or it's revenge, or it's this or that. Trump moves in very much the same vein. If he got elected with all that power, and he's rattled his sabers a little bit, I'm sure he's not going to come out and put his face on the White House, and he's not going to have brown shirts. That's old news. That's old history. However, I think there would definitely be some danger there. I actually know quite a few leftists that are going to vote for Trump in the hopes that he brings on riots and just like gets things to go worse faster.
I've heard the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Among the sordid thing we call the radical left.
Sad thing we call the radical left.
Yeah, the often very frustrating and sad thing we call the radical left in the United States. I'm sorry, I've been in too many various radical leftist Facebook groups over the past few weeks, having too many conversations to have much appreciation for it.
Oh no, I agree totally. Especially as an egoist, it's now it's. I mean, I got into a 3-hour long argument with a Marxist that was I couldn't believe. She was defending gulags, defending the Ukraine famine, defending Stalin was not bad at all, did nothing wrong. The people that were killed were the enemies of the party. One of the communists I met that was in the Bernie group, incognito, full-blown CP USA card, and he's like, and he kind of leans in, he's got his little cigarette that he's smoking, and he says to me, the kulaks weren't good people. And I'm like, how do you know that? And he's like, well, they were class traitors. They were party enemies. And I'm like, what does that mean? You know what I mean? So that's how easy people can be spooked by these ideological ideas. You just have to label someone as, yeah, he's a foreigner, or oh yeah, that's a class traitor right there. And these people, mental processes shut down, and they just run on these instinctual biofeedback loops of oh, enemy, okay, whatever happens to him is fine with me. Again, you remember the whole God, what was it? The Bundy people? Is that what they were? That had that whole, ranch thing that they occupied or whatever?
Yeah. The militia guys up there. Yeah.
And here you had these, anti-war activists that in literally 5 minutes apart, like, how dare the American empire drone strike these innocent people? 5 minutes later, they should drone the fuck out of these people. These are, terrorists. They are traitors. And it's like, terrorists and traitors, like, whoa, like, where did you just, so now it's okay to drone strike someone, but, it's, yeah, ideology and these, the left is just so, luckily the left in the United States is just so, at this point, really, it's like a superstitious religion. You know what I mean? Like, they're still bundying around these, 1930s terms, seize the means of production. Well, everybody's about to have the means of production in their home. And what does it mean when, the means of production don't necessarily translate to a digital economy, and I don't like my job. Why do I want to be tied to my job? Why do I want to be a worker? I'm much more than a worker. I don't want to, have my entire existence defined by the menial task I happen to have when the revolution occurred. You know what I mean?
Where do you see these sort of, anarchists, internet hacker groups such as Anonymous? What role do you see them playing in this sort of transitory period?
I can't say, sadly, I can't say that they're going to have a sort of unified stance or a sort of, Anonymous 1 minute is shutting down some Wall Street servers, and on the next minute shutting down Black Lives Matter websites. Like, like it's so like just random. However, you can sort of stir people up for whatever reason they strike. And also, one of the things that Anonymous hasn't exactly jumped from is, okay, you shut down someone's website. I'm sure they're really hurting that they won't be able to get their emails today. Wow, you talk about a victory. You really did it, guys. Capitalism is about to end tomorrow. I can remember being a little, insurgent and downloading, the low orbit ion cannon and, DDoSing websites and, it's fun, but it doesn't quite have the same forces. Like when Anonymous leaks, doxing people, now that has power. I can remember, I would love to see Anonymous return to some of the more insurrectionary tactics it had back in the day, when Anonymous was still just 4chan. When, someone said something, okay, and it was the most innocent thing ever. And Anonymous would get their email, get their phones, and they wouldn't just call you. They would call your school. They would call your parents at all hours of the day. They'd say you molested people. They would send you packages. They ruined your life. Anonymous, and as much as they want to seem like, protest warriors nowadays, I remember when Anonymous caused people to kill themselves. Some of them on camera, and were cheered on as they did it. Like, yeah, Anonymous literally has been responsible for the deaths of some people. Like, that was the mob mentality. Like, it happened, And so there is this, that sort of tactics could still come around. It could still exist. I think Anonymous, as it grows in its sophistication, when they really gain a larger grasp for, like, okay, how can we shut down the Eastern Seaboard? You know what I mean? But as long as it's still games of like, yeah, now your cell phone's leaked. Uh-oh, anyone can, send you an email. Ooh, we showed you, or we shut down your website. It's still sort of kind of childish, and it's a way for people who can't act any other way to join in and feel like they did something. However, I think Anonymous obviously has led to a sort of psychological phenomenon that actually the anime Ghost in the Shell first talked about, the sort of standalone complex that, these people, you had individuals that would act independently as an identity. It sort of reminds me of the old elf campaigns in the 90s. You had all these environmental terrorists who would, call themselves elf. These people didn't know each other, but they kind of formed this collective group identity to become something sort of larger than themselves, and individuals could act it and everything. I think Anonymous still didn't, to put it shortly, I think Anonymous still needs to mature. I think Anonymous is still in its infancy. It's growing. I can guarantee you that Anonymous is definitely under some heavy infiltration and attack because it's so easy. Because you can sort of see how Anonymous's politics used to be so strong, and then now they're kind of wavering. You know what I mean? Like wishy-washy, like the sheer fact that they're attacking Black Lives Matters activists, just when I saw that, it just threw me for a loop. Like, what the hell has happened?
Certain cells, and that's
Yeah.
how you were talking, what you were talking about just a few minutes ago. It's
That's one of the drawbacks of that organizational structure, right?
Mm.
And especially when the idea of anonymous is basically the same idea as the black bloc on the street, right?
Yes.
Anybody could be a member, and then you could not be a member a moment later, right? With anonymous, of course, it requires a certain skill set. But the drawback there is that there are groups that can just call themselves anonymous, and they could try to discredit, if they wanted to, the entire rest of that movement by one cell's action.
Well,
right?
it's just like in Black Bloc, how many times have we seen undercover cops show up as Black Bloc and just go to a rally and just start breaking stuff, and you can see their boots and everything like that. It's the same thing with anonymous. Sadly, it's very easy to infiltrate.
And that was the problem with, as you mentioned, the ELF and the ALF, particularly in the 90s. As you know, after 9/11 and immediately before 9/11, they moved into a lot of those movements, especially the environmental movement, put in plants. I mean, there's instances of what can only be described as legal entrapment on
Absolutely.
activists, right? You have organizations that are like that even now. I think one of the best organizations that I can think of with that kind of organizational model would be the Crime Think Ex-Workers Collective. Okay. Now, the main thing that we think of Crime Think is the publishing arm. It's Crime Think Far East.
Yeah.
Those are like long-term activists who all know each other and work really well together, and that's really tight-knit and secure, that core group, right? But, of course, anybody can put on a Crime Thing sticker and go do whatever the hell they want in that name. You know what I mean? So that's just a fault of that organizational structure. I'm still a fan of that organization.
Oh, no. I will absolutely. I actually have one journal on modern insurrectionist tactics, this sort of very new asymmetrical warfare. And it is absolutely, even with its drawbacks, it is really amazing at how hard it is to infiltrate or sort of really sway. One of the things that a declassified FBI document was talking about, ELF, one of the things was they told people, do not join any cells. Do not let people join your cell. If you want to do something, form your own cell. So all you had was a sort of news outlet for people to let other people know what you did. And so you were able to feed off one another. Sort of like Insurrectionist News now. They are a news organization. I remember when Black December came around. Oh, my God, man, you were seeing things it was amazing. It made you want to jump out and burn something down. It was fantastic to see all these other people worldwide doing stuff. So the cellular structure is good. I think that one of the things that it's missing is this sort of sense that I think a strong strain of individualism, because right now all these cellular things are still wrapped up in a sort of groupthink mentality. You know what I mean? Like Anonymous is an entity larger than ourselves. We are furthering Anonymous. We're creating Anonymous as a thing. It's an identity for us to slip in. Whereas I would be interested to see a cellular tactic where, okay, so one branch of Anonymous does whatever. That doesn't matter because all that matters is the individual victory and individual damage. So it'd be interesting to see a sort of cellular structure that's not even based on solution, or this sort of culture. It would just be straight up like, we want to destroy the state. That's it. And you could have of course you could, wrap it up in some collective imagery. You could call it, Hercules, or you could take some random hero that, maybe even Titan, or, some kind of thing that battled the gods, and people could, post about how Titan did this, Titan did that. Look at what Florida Man's become, in a way, like he's this sort of
amorphous concept.
That's sort of almost got a life of its own and everything like that. If you had that, but it wasn't predicated on a global revolution, but just an ongoing sense of attack, I think tactically that would do a lot much more damage. I think it would achieve a lot more change, and I think it would be even more difficult to break apart because, okay, if 10,000 cells were found and destroyed, it wouldn't matter because all that matters is that you fought back under the name of whatever.
When it comes to Anonymous, what I'd really love to see, and I can only imagine that a lot of like the old school Anonymous people and the people who are really, really good at what they do have thought of this and are probably, working on it, is not just to take down a website, but to actually get into the mainframes of banking institutions, etc., and wipe out debt records.
Oh,
that would be massive.
Like,
yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. Student loan debt, credit card debt.
Yeah.
If they can get into the mainframes and they can erase those records, that would actually do a lot of damage to the system.
Did you see that Chilean artist that did that? He broke into,
Yes.
That required no internet. And now, granted, Chile isn't as wired as us, but I think there's also something to say that someone was like, no, I went in, I got him, and I burned him, and that's that. So this is my gift to you. And the guy, I love his statement. He's like, yeah, I'm poor and my life is shit, and I know yours is too. So this is my gift of love to you. And it's
that was the end goal of Project Mayhem in Fight Club.
Yeah,
it's not like people haven't thought of this. You know what I mean?
Exactly. I would love to see that too. I would really, really love to see that. And you have to wonder. I think also an unspoken thing, and I had a hacker friend talk to me about this, is a lot of people turn white hat hacker because of all the money. He was telling me about some guys that just rented hotels up and down your traditional New England neighborhoods or whatever. And then they went to all these different central port authorities and stuff like that. They're like, so we hacked all your electricity. Here it is. We could have shut it off at any point. We could have done anything we wanted. And these people get paid to help fix those things. So they could have in that moment been like, bye, New England, and just shut it down just for the hell of it. But instead, there's this sort of profit motive of, okay, well, I've got this knowledge. I can make it work for me. And so you have a lot of these sort of, look at that. I forget that. I can't recall the name. One year, there was a guy who successfully proved he could hack pacemakers. Now, interestingly enough, he wound up dead shortly, after. But what kind of knowledge is that to where you're just like, yep, I can do it. Check it out. Who wants to pay me to figure out how?
Yeah. Yeah, no surprise that guy ended up dead.
Yeah, no, he overplayed his hand big time there.
Yeah. But, that's the classic new tactic is, if you can't beat them, buy them.
Yep, absolutely.
And that goes for, and that's been around forever. But it's especially been used by, the U.S. corporate government structure. That's basically what happened with, take a CIA asset like Osama bin Laden.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right. So we've identified this guy. You're fighting the Soviets in Afghanistan. You've already built up a little infrastructure. Why don't you come work for us?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And we'll give you a lot of money and we'll fund your cause because it serves our interest. And you're now a CIA asset.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, the one bad thing about that, and again, this sort of plays into what's going on in France, is they don't count for the indignation. Look at Noriega, right? Started out as CIA asset, and then one day Noriega's like, you know what? Nah, screw you guys. Chavez was the same way, CIA asset. And then he read a little Marx and he's like, you know what? F these guys. Yeah, this is terrible. Screw America. Again, there's this sort of rising climate, not tied to ideology, but just tied to indignation and anger and resentment. You know what I mean? And it gets harder and harder to buy people off when you've caused them individual pain. It's easy to buy off collective pain because then it makes a lot more sense. Erin Brockovich, one of her things that nobody talks about is at the end of the story, she took the money. She took the money and ran.
Yeah.
They're still dying with tumors, stuff like that. Whereas if it's your brother that got beat up by the cops, if it's your family that was put into poverty, if it's your, something as simple as you can't afford to watch your Game of Thrones anymore, suddenly things change and you get pissed and you're not happy until you can sort of lash out against them.
It's the insidious nature of it. Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that really strikes me is I think that's just going to be coming up, like in my articles I call it like the age of the hyena. Like now it's like there's a very real sense in the air that like, okay, whatever comes after this is not going to be like another golden age. Whether Russia wins, China, the United States, it's not going to be like the techno utopia we were promised when everyone was doing ecstasy in the 90s. You know what I mean? The internet didn't make us free. Technology didn't make us free. The United States running the world didn't make us free. People are beginning to and as things are slowly breaking down. God, suicides are at an all-time high in the US. Overdoses are at an all-time high, which, a lot of those are suicides as well. You have this very real sense of social anome pervading individual lives and really driving them crazy. And the more faith that goes out of the system, the more people laugh at it and the more people get turned off and create their own structures, the less power it has. And then what's left is really just to pick at the bones as they slowly go down. I think as the how many people in their neighborhoods are really just waiting for a good blackout to loot Walmart? How many people hate Walmart with a burning passion, but you can't steal from there because you don't want to get caught. But if the lights went out and you knew they weren't coming on for 3 days, how many people would probably not only steal from Walmart, but burn it to the ground? What I mean?
That bastard would be empty.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And the thing is, there's always, and we get glorified with these stories, right? I remember, I think it was during Katrina, okay? And there's this story that circulates online. Who knows how true it is? Maybe this was manufactured somewhere within the depths of Walmart, right? Mm-hmm. But there's this story about a guy who went in and took a bunch of food and loaded it into a shopping cart, and then he went into the manager's office because the whole place was deserted and left a $20 bill with a note saying that he didn't want to leave without paying for the food, right? And stories like that try to like reinforce, the whole idea of subservience.
Yeah, and they dress it up in this morality that this is something that you're supposed to do, and it's terrible. Again,
David Graeber, calls it, the manufactured morality of debt, which is, deeply tied into old spiritual practices and etc. But, I think more likely, especially with the rising anger people have with that institution in particular, and with institutions in general, all the Walmarts across the country would be empty.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It would just be done. Yeah. The regular morality that we've been fed, and again, this is something I'm starting to explore in some writing of mine, like, what makes morality really? What defines good and bad? It's extremely subjective. And if you really break it apart to its basis instinct, not talking about Nietzschean sort of ideas of like slave morality and master morality, but if you take your average morality, which I suppose you could argue is slave morality, good is someone that goes along with what is asked of them. You are good if you, follow what we've told you to do, if you believe if you make yourself very easy to go along with, even if, okay, what defines a good prisoner? Someone that's calm in their cell, listens to the guards, doesn't get angry and everything like that.
And rats out everybody else.
Exactly. Morality itself is just this overarching, even into I think it's even more insidious in certain ways because, everybody's told, listen to your conscience, and there is absolutely, especially as a spiritual person, there is a deep inner core of you that you can listen to actually give you, good advice, but it's not this slave mentality of like, just go with the flow. And if you don't want to hurt anybody now, because we've cut ourselves off from this righteous indignation that you should feel when all of this is happening to you. The American people should be up in arms. They should be, the sheer fact that we can see some of our most impoverished citizens burn down a CVS, which is nothing more than basically a corporate colonial outpost siphoning money away from that community. Oh, and we lament it. How could they destroy this property? Well, whose property? And at that point, who cares? Oh, well, those people don't have jobs anymore. Oh, I'm sure they will find some other minimum wage jobs in their area. You know, it's like everywhere we look and we have these ideas about morality and what's good and what's bad, it's always something outside of ourselves, always something removed from our own individual experience, and it always seems to be something that's given to us by someone else. And if you look at it, they're trying to reinforce it harder and harder because, just like you said, now the narrative is falling apart. People don't have respect, right? To have a plantation work, the slaves have to at least respect the master as worthy of respect. A prison guard is supposed to be deserving of respect. A gangster needs respect to stop people from killing him. They have to enforce that. And now as that narrative is falling apart, I think, look at the rise of these sort of weird Christian cults. Mormonism is way up. I heard a lot of these sort of, Pentecostals are up. These people are seeing their old moral backgrounds falling apart. They're seeing the people that they believed were powerful because they were good disappearing and turning out not to be good. So they're looking for even stricter and stronger moral codes to make them feel like everything they've believed and everything they've done is worthwhile. They don't want to wake up one morning and realize that, the fact that you kissed your boss's ass every day and you never broke a law doesn't get you anywhere in heaven.
Right. So, basically morality comes down from God, and in the civilized period, quote unquote, that we've had the last 5,000-6,000 years, that's usually deeply tied in with the state.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, I think I really truly think that it really does boil down to that. It's a matter of people just owning the fact and not apologizing for the fact of being pissed off. And I think what's dangerous about someone like, for example, Trump, is he's taking this animosity that's naturally occurring in people and he's diverting it towards, it's the Mexicans.
Yep, absolutely.
It's the Muslims. And it's like, no. Let's wake up here and actually look and point this animosity to the people who are really at fault. And to me, that's not a gray area. That there's a legitimate culprit behind all this.
Oh, absolutely. What's interesting is Jung talked about, especially as he was watching Hitler rise, he was talking about a very real psychical phenomena in the German people that, whether Hitler had been there or not, someone would have come forth that sort of, it's this, again, there's this sort of weird element to it. Okay, one of the gods I've been reading about that I'm finding so terribly fascinating is this Haitian Loa in the system of Udon, and he's called Baron Criminal. All right, now we all know Baron Gede, this laughing, joking, drinking, womanizing guy. He's immoral and he can help with life and death. There's also La Baronne de Creux, which is like the Baron of the Cross, which is sort of a more necromantic guy. Graveyard and everything like that. And then you got basically Baron Criminal, La Baron Criminal. Okay, so this is a spiritual entity, okay? And when he's summoned, everyone is afraid instantly. There's a huge presence that apparently fills the room. And if he is served the wrong way, whatever booze he drinks, he will hit the person that's possessed by him, will rip out a chunk of flesh out of the person's arm with their teeth. His offerings are not food. He prefers to have live chickens, have kerosene dumped on them, and then lit on fire while they're alive. He feeds off of the cruelty and pain of the act. He doesn't want the food. He doesn't eat. Unlike other Loa, he doesn't do any of that. So this guy, Le Baron Criminal, what's interesting is in the gay days, you can ask for favors, and Baron Grady is like, you don't need to pay me right now. I understand if you're whatever. But there is a certain cutoff point, and if you don't pay off these sort of agents of the dead or whatever by a certain date, La Baron Criminal comes for you, and he comes with you at the full force and cruelty and destruction. And so I was thinking about it. Here's an entity with a very real intelligence. And I've traced him in my own research as far back as at least Zora Neale Hurston's trip to Haiti, where he's only mentioned slightly. She never saw him or anything like that, but that at least proves that he was around.
Right.
So you have this entity that is just literally the calcification of the most cruel, sadistic vengeance, you know? And this is a thing that's sort of floating out in whatever the spirit world is, whatever kind of ether it is, that also seems directly tied to human consciousness. You know, so what's interesting is we have this huge myriad of different gods and goddesses of, you know, all sorts of different flavors and temperaments, and yet we ignore the more diabolic, evil, cruel, destructive beings, Pazuzu, Urshkal, Nergal, all these different, you know, really just terrible gods and everything like that. And my thought process is, you know, these things are there and they've existed for a long time, and you begin to wonder if they are not as much a part of the creation as anything else, as love. You know, it's often easy for us to talk in our sort of, you know, love conquers all. Well, does it really? You know, the Christmas truce in World War I was broken by the officers who threw in a hell of a lot more snipers to blow people's heads off, and that was that. You know, yeah. So
yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, love of what?
Yeah. So there's these different sort of almost, if we look at the gods or spirits as sort of these intelligent nexuses of emotional if we can look at them as sort of interacting with humans as emotional nexuses capable of outpouring information, thought, and force. You know, you have these very real hate, resentment, rage, cruelty, death, vengeance, all these different things that are just as much a part of the universe as anything else. And, you know, as I'm looking through this, I'm wondering, like, you typical leftist politics, you know, you get this idea that one day there's going to be this, you know, fucking utopia where we all hold hands and there's no more violence and everything like that. And, you know, reading and, you know, studying and working with these different spirits and things like that, I'm beginning to realize that none of these things are ever going to go away. You know, we're talking about intelligences that are older than civilization itself that may have shifted and changed. You know, Thoth may have become Hermes, but there's still something out there that's still sort of the same thing. And you begin to wonder, how interesting is it that we human beings have been so domesticated to where they don't want you to tap into this? You know, the Haitian Revolution was not led by the Rada nations of Loa, which is your typical very high, quiet, clean Loa. You know, they don't want animal sacrifices. They want water and candles. No, it was the Petwo nation, which is the fiery gunpowder, blood sacrifice, you know, these sort of agents of chaos and destruction that were the ones that said, yeah, to hell with the slave owners, you know, no, go get them, you know, absolutely, go get them, do whatever you have to be free, instead of, you know, making peace with your enemy. And I find it interesting that so much of human spirituality now has been either A, they've divorced themselves completely from the sort of darker aspect of it, or they've demonized it to where it's you can't talk about it, you don't want to do anything with it, it's you know, taboo to even discuss it. And it's sort of like, you know, when we even call something the left-hand path, we look at it as sort of this like vestigial appendage that we don't want to talk about, but to me, this is actual real human life is loving, it's hating, it's being friendly with someone, it's you know, spitting when they're not, you know, looking, it's all these different things. And it seems like the gods and the spirits act the same way. Who does it serve when we cut off half of our spirituality? Because clearly it's not serving the people at the bottom.
I think it's interesting. Well, first of all, you know, you're an occultist. I'm an occultist. We're all of us are occultists in some strain or another. I was waiting for it to get weird. I was waiting for it to get weird. You know what I mean?
I love it to get weird.
But that's so true about the complexities, and so much of it gets suppressed. I wonder. I have several questions. The first one, though, being. Do you think that these, do you think these entities are, like, we're kind of wrought in their image and that complexity, or are they wrought in our image because of our own complexity? Or is there some middle ground?
That is the ultimate, and myself, I'm having such a hard time, because it does, okay, this is the way I kind of see it. this. All right, if we're talking about, and we're not just talking about, we'll move up an echelon from spirits. So we'll get up away from like regular dead people, spirits of the land, whatever. But we're talking about gods. It seems to me that human beings exist in a realm or state of flux, a state of change. We can change things. We can, change the properties of things. We can take, rock or iron or ore and make it into buildings or weapons, and we can do all these different things. Human existence is a flux. It is a constant flow of change. How interesting is it that the traditional guardian of the magical gate, the traditional teacher of the magical arts, is the devil at the crossroads, right? A trickster god. So this is, again, if you want to look at the god that seems so closely aligned to humanity, the Prometheus figure that whispers to us what, the monotheist doesn't want us to hear, it is a god of flux, of change, of constantly moving faces. The spirit world seems not as capable of dynamic change as we are. Gordon White had a very interesting, idea where he said something in one of his blog posts like, why do the spirits why do they desire sacrifice? It can't be for nutritional. There. I guess I must have dropped her. Oh, all right. So it can't be for nutritional value, because otherwise they would just hang out at like grocery stores all day and just, siphon off whatever off apples. And he made an interesting claim that perhaps what they're interested is the idea of sacrifice, that we're taking something from our own and giving it to them. I think it even goes further than that. When we give the spirits an object, we aren't just giving it to them. We aren't just fascinating them with the idea that this is mine, now it's yours. But we're also, when we give them that image or that object, it's imprinted with all our memories and sensations. A lot of the dead have a very keen understanding that things are not the same for them, that they lack certain abilities to feel and sense things. And a lot of times with sort of higher realm spirits or gods or whatever you call them, minus a very, the sort of African diaspora, which seem very connected to the earth and feeling, maybe even more so. There's this sort of fascination with human existence. Why does Gate wallow in human sexuality, even more so than anyone? It's like they love to become human for a moment to get these sensations, as if they exist in a world where that constant flux and change doesn't exist. Like I've said before, Odin is always Odin. Thor is always Thor. Hermes may have changed and wore different skins, and if maybe we'll take a step back and say whatever the hell it is that was Thoth one minute and then Hermes the next, just like it was Isis one minute and maybe the Virgin Mary the next, or maybe they're separated and yet the same entity, all sorts of different things. They are not quite as capable of change and sensation as we are in this world. Our world seems to be the world of conflict, of force, of dissolution, of mutability, of all these different things, and they seem particularly infatuated with it. So I think maybe it's a half and a half. They get something out of it and we get something out of it. We get communication with a force that can pulse through our world, and because of its unchanging nature, in a hoodoo sense, I think of it as like cooking. Right. And let's say you're calling on some kind of war god. Right. It's like you've got this pot of spaghetti and you don't want the person you're feeding it to enjoy it. So you dump a shitload of red pepper in it. You know what I mean? That's like calling on that spirit that is particularly aggravated. Or when you want a hoodoo bag to like really get working, or you want a spirit to speed up, you throw red pepper in it. And, now that spirit could have been around red peppers, but it's something about you giving it the red pepper that like it gets the sensation of heat, like it wouldn't before, and it really gets it going. So I think they feed off of us and we feed off of them, and it's a sort of very symbiotic relationship. Who came? Who knows? That's something to be decided long after I'm dead.
Right. That general mythos goes so far back. This idea that the angelic realms or the celestial realms almost have a tinge of jealousy over the human realm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I haven't worked with a lot of angelic powers myself, but some of the different spirits I have worked with, it is a sort of very they just a lot of things they don't seem to quite grasp. They seem there's a lot of novelty for them, I think, in
They're
it as
very
well.
distant. They're very distant and progressively more arrogant.
Oh yes, absolutely, and that's why it's unwise for I think another reason why the occult has always stayed what it is because no, you do not want every 16-year-old knowing how to summon whatever that Baphomet in his bedroom. No, it's just a bad idea. He is not prepared to deal with that. Just the same as I tell people, I would never bring a small child of mine to a Pentecostal church because I don't know if it's quite good for a small child to be exposed to that sort of total ripping open of like psychical energy with really, you look at it, they're just speaking in tongues and shit. It almost seems like it's just like rip open any old hole and we're enjoying it. Just like
I was just about to say if whatever spirit gets pulled in that they call the Holy Ghost in the Pentecostal churches, whatever that spirit is, it seems like a rapist to me.
Yeah, for real. Or it's like the spiritualists. They used to just be like, hey, any dead people? Literally anybody. I mean, anybody want to talk to us? For the love of God, please. We are very alone.
Yeah.
They didn't care, and it's just not a good idea to just have any old, just open your front door with a sign "free stuff" inside and see what kind of visitors you get.
Yeah, see what sort of folks show up. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But no, that's one of the article I'm working on is what I find interesting is that that you have this like these spirits that sort of drift between good, bad, indifferent, violent, peaceful, everything like that. And Nietzsche's idea of the eternal recurrence, it's always been something that sort of baffled Nietzschean scholars. Like, just what the hell was this guy talking about? And I've sort of been thinking about it more and more of like, maybe he was talking about that you have these entities, these powers. Of course, he wouldn't describe it as thus, but we can at least pull it to an occult sort of lens. You have these entities and these powers that are forever exerting these different things. And that, yes, no matter what imaginary kingdom you create to where there's peace and joy, there will always be that force out there. Number one, the crossroads God that says, well, this has to change. Why? Because it just has to. He's the God of flux, of nothing settling, of constantly, dynamic moving. Your peace, your revolution will always be fought against by the trickster because that's who he is. That's what it is, his job to throw things in the air and shake them up. Just the same as you'll always have these things that are moving against you. Wherever stability is established, chaos seeks to move in. Wherever there's chaos, stability seeks. So it's this constant interplay of all these forces that sort of reveal themselves in a very Tolkien sense of like, okay, evil, if you want to call it that, quote unquote, or we could just say destruction, will never ever be defeated. It's something that can be battled, just like entropy. But at the end of the day, it will always come back. It will always claim lives. It will always be. And so in a Nietzschean sense, and in a spiritual sense, coming to sense this idea that, okay, there's this gigantic spirit world filled with all these different things that will not allow humanity just to sit on its laurels, whether it be because they want to inspire rage, because whether they want to inspire art, because whether they want to inspire intelligence or esoteric wisdom, or if they just want humanity to breed so they can, have more food stuff. Humanity is intricately linked to these beings. They're not going to let us go. And peace and violence, stability and chaos, destruction and growth will always be in a state of flux, and it will happen again and again and again. And there can be no teleological principle saying that this age will ever end.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It sort of reminds me of, I'm not sure how familiar you are with Gnosticism or Gnostic thought.
Oh, yes. Love the Gnostics.
Yeah. And, their whole idea that basically that this God that calls himself Yahweh has sort of claimed a monopoly over the whole pantheon. And, this God that's supposed to be of divine love and beauty and everything that's good is really just a demon masquerading as such. So it makes me wonder, is it better to have a sort of decentralized pantheon where there's a variety of different forces, as opposed to just putting all of our belief in just one overarching entity? Like, is that sort of almost inherently evil to allow one entity to sort of monopolize our belief?
Or
Well, I
even
think-
one small system of entities.
Right.
Yeah. I think what's interesting is even in the, one of the most monotheistic faiths, Judaism, in the Kabbalah, you have the idea of Gevurah, the left hand path, or the left hand of God, which is severity. So while they can say it's all one God, you have this idea that it's this specific aspect of God that's so specific it kind of gets its own name. And yeah, he kind of destroys stuff because that's his job. There's this interesting parable, and I think I might have said it in the last podcast, where okay, God saying yes creates the creation, and the creation goes and goes and goes and goes, and it doesn't stop until finally God says stop, and the creation remains in its bounds. That's Gevurah. So humanity lives and lives and lives forever, and then God's like, nah, don't live forever. That's Gevurah, AIDS works. Okay, don't live forever. Or, cancer, all right, that's how it's going to happen. So even the monotheistic faiths are, Catholicism, okay, well, it's the devil. And it's, they never really bother to explain why the devil gets to have exactly as much power as God. Well, then how could it be God? I think the Gnostics had a very good idea with the archons and everything like that. Do I think there's one overarching demiurge? In their time, it would have made sense where, okay, the Catholic Church was the religion. Well, then, yeah, Jehovah is quite literally the chief spirit of Europe at the time, probably soaking up as many prayers as he can get his hands on. Yeah, at that point, he would have probably been, a hell of a thing to combat. Nowadays, Yahweh is not what he used to be at all. Absolutely not. I don't think there's a demiurge. I think there's archons. What I find interesting about Gnostic theology is they had this very clear sense that they wanted to liberate humanity from this whole cycle of influence. There was a lot of Gnostic rituals about freeing yourself from the influence of the planets. So it was a very much sort of oh my God, we have got to get ourselves out of here. This idea that humanity was trapped in this eternal recurrence of different forces constantly. Yeah, they really did see it. Because if you think about it, yeah, it's these different beings that are constantly, trying to influence you in whatever way you can, or whatever way they can. And for the Gnostics, it is, let's just hit the eject pack and get the hell out of here. Whereas the esoteric path is, okay, so it's kind of like you're in a very bad neighborhood. There's a lot of gangs. A couple of people in one gang. You're not hanging out with that gang, but a couple people. You can rely on them to help you with some things that normal people wouldn't, and you're just really hoping that with your friend's knowledge of how the neighborhood is, you can get the hell out of there. I think that's the more practical path, because I don't know. All these sort of Gnostic and Eastern faiths are really big on life denying, deny yourself this pleasure, deny yourself that, where, while we may be in this sort of Matrix-esque thing, it is in a way, I don't think the sort of metaphor of the Matrix truly captures it, because it is enjoyable. We do get something from it. These stirrings of emotions, these flights of fancy, these, brave heroics and stuff like that. We do live in this realm of flux and change. And if you can hold on to that and you can really sort of dive into that sort of Legba issue crossroads mentality of, okay, I'm going to become this whirlwind of change just as the world is. I'm going to choose the spirits I walk with because I choose, a lot of people, when they start out with the occult, it's really funny. They go God shopping, they're, oh, well, I mean, I kind of this is a Celtic goddess, and oh, well, Ganesh is so cool. And, you go to their altars and it's they've got 20 different beings that maybe get a candle every 2 months. And there's no relationship. You know what I mean? Whereas if you sort of let your practice grow over time, you get to meet spirits that you need in your individual life. You get to build what the Espiritistas would call your spiritual court. So instead of just beings that influence you, you know, you sort of find, okay, if we can say luck, we'll say luck is this thing that exists in the world, right? And it just pulses through it and it changes things. There are different variations of luck, okay? Ganesh's luck is different than Billiken's luck, you know, and you sort of have these personal resonances. For some people, Ganesh is a better good luck god. For some people, Hotai is. For myself, Billiken is. And the different aspects of these gods and their personalities are sort of seeds within you. So it's kind of like how Alan Moore devoted himself to that crazy-ass fake snake god and like fat parts of himself. So again, that's sort of, instead of a completely parasitic relationship, it is sort of a give and take, symbiotic. I don't think the creation, whatever it is, can exist totally with us, and it certainly can't exist totally with them.
Yeah, it's kind of a push and pull. Yeah, you definitely do need to you definitely need to do some exploring, you know. That's why I hate dogmatism. I'd like you to react to this. We just did a podcast not too long ago with Thad McCracken.
Yes, Thad.
Thad, you know, for our listeners are going to be familiar with Thad. He's been on the show a few times. Disinformation occult writer. And after we put up his last podcast, I had a couple conversations with him. He talked a little bit about this in the podcast and in some of his articles, but so I'm not. This isn't just the context of a personal conversation. But he's of the opinion that the occult, especially in this country, has become extraordinarily atrophied and dogmatic, even within circles like, for example, he and I both, you know, are kind of in the chaos magic, circle, right? That's the majority of my practice, right? And he's of the opinion that it's become, like I said, atrophied, very dogmatic. You know, people are shouting each other down. This isn't the right way to do this. This is the right way. You can only do this. You can't mix and match. Okay. And he says that it's the occult is becoming overwhelmingly dogmatic and negative, right? In the communities, not the practice itself, but in the communities. What would you say to that? Have you noticed that at all?
Well, again, I come from a sort of different realm with, you know, hoodoo and conjure, which is so weird to me. I agree with that in one, because I actually, and, you know, Thad, you know, I'm just saying this. I got into an argument with some guy who was like, yeah, well, because when he found out I was a disinfo writer, he's like, you tell Thad McCracken, go fuck himself. Chaos magic never needed him anyway.
That, you know what? That's exactly what I'm talking about.
And I was like, what?
Yeah,
this is a chaos magician.
Yeah, exactly. And I was shocked by it myself. You know, the context of my last conversation with Thad was to tell him how shocked I was that just, you know, this was probably a year and a half ago, maybe, Pat, we first had Thad on. Longer, almost 2 years, probably. The first time. And I remember then his podcast was widely well received in a lot of the communities that, you know, I posted it in. People had nothing but good things to say about the guy. I put this last podcast out a couple of weeks ago, and you wouldn't believe, like, the aggressive vitriol that I had, even in chaos magic groups.
Oh, I'm sure.
And so I had the exact same experience, and I was shocked. I talked to him about it. I was like, what the hell? He's obviously doing something right because he's pushing people's buttons.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, when you create a post, you know, death to chaos magic, yeah, you're usually, people are going to react. Right. In my own sort of field of knowledge, we have a similar thing, but it's based on, like, authenticity. You know what I mean? Because it's, in hoodoo and conjure, everybody wants to be like the real deal. Like, oh, well, my grandma happened to know Marie Laveau, and this is actually the way you do it. You had a whole bunch of random white people teach you that. I don't know what that is, you know. So there is this sort of one-upmanship about who has the lineage and everything like that. But I think also the difference is, okay, in Conjure, it was never... Chaos magic was absolutely based on results, absolutely 100%. But it also, one of the problems it came with, packaged with, was this sort of like psychotronic, Discordian, imitized Eschaton thing. You know what I mean? To where you weren't just a chaos magician, you were, an elevated Ubermensch that like, there's a whole bunch of really funny chaos magic memes, all sorts of different stuff. But like it had this sort of culture behind it, right? And just like any subculture, the minute things start to change and schism and everything like that, things get really crazy. Whereas in Hoodoo and Conjure, okay, we have this like historical background that we're all fighting over, which is, luckily limited to some oral documents. Like, it's not like this huge corpus as is Western esotericism. You know what I mean? You can go from Golden Dawn to, whatever. But Conjure has always been primarily based on what, a lot of ceremonial magicians call low magic, which for me it never was, because always you learn something in the process.
Yeah, I used to be one of those people. That's how I came into the whole thing. I was a Golden Dawn guy. I know.
I purchased an excellent, blew my fucking head off, book called The Conjure Codex by Jake Stratton Kent and plenty of other authors. It's a journal. And it fuses traditional grimoire magic with New World traditions. And it's not really even a fusion. It's more a conversation between the two. Hey, this is interesting. Tell me more about this. Well, this is interesting. You tell me about this. And it's really interesting, and it's sort of acting as this new sort of fusion energy. So you have conjurers out there who are now calling on Freemost, to help with this. And you also have people that are working with the true grimoire that are making themselves familiar with the Exu and all sorts of different things like that. So the ATRs, I think, because of their inherent syncretic nature, that while even though they'll fight over houses and lineages and everything like that, and they'll pride themselves, first Quimbunda house in the U.S., this, that, and the other, the system is inherently syncretic. Okay, Protestant magic met Catholic saints, met new Native American herbology, met whatever grimoires they could get their hands on. Which, remember, they didn't even. That's the thing about Hoodoo. I think so speaks to its character, right? They got peddled some random ass grimoires, okay, that whatever Books of Solomon. They looked at it and they're like, oh, what's it? Okay, remain celibate for 3 days. Oh, no. Where this? Oh, this symbol is like some spirit that can help me find treasure. Hell yeah. All right, let's do that. You know what I mean? They removed all the ritual and they just, they steam jacked everything they needed out of it and then just left whatever they didn't. So to me, Hoodoo is a lot more nebulous, a lot more syncretic. I don't see as much wizard wars as I definitely, sadly, do see coming up. One of the things I couldn't understand, I was told by a chaos magician that Gordon White has, quote unquote, not as much like chaos magic cred because he has a real job. Like, what is that? I don't understand. Like, how do you demean someone because they actually have a job? Like, they're supposed to be like drawing sigils in blood in like an abandoned parking lot, and like that's the only way to be a wizard or something like that. Like, I don't know. Some of the Western Magicka just blows my mind. I'm much more comfortable with the ATRs. Everything's just so much more simpler there. Spirits, go find them, talk to them, learn the local biosphere, do your thing. And if anyone really pisses you off and tells you you're doing the wrong thing, just put a hex on them. And whoever wins. Plain and simple.
Right. Yeah, it's. I don't know. The differences are interesting, man. And especially you're talking about initiation and lineage. It's so many people put such a high stake on that. It's really. I remember coming in from high magic into like. Looking at chaos magic for the first time years ago. And I remember looking around and talking to people like, what's the right way to do this sigil thing? Uh-huh. Which is like, just funny now. But it's like I was coming in from a tradition where it's like, Wait a minute, you mean I can produce the same results without chanting for 30 minutes first? Huh. You know what I mean? And placing everything at perfect angles and doing it, you know?
Yeah, and the right planet is in the sky. Have you ever heard of The Long Lost Friend by George Homan?
Yeah.
Okay, if you and this blew my head off. Like, the first time I saw it, here are these like almost like little limericks, and it's like, how to stop blood. Say this. Make the sign of the cross 3 times. And you're looking at it and you're like, no. There's no way that you just do this and you stop bleeding. You know what I mean? Like, magic is primarily like, okay, unseen. Maybe my boss gives me a raise for, all these pieces fall together. One of the things that interested me about powwow, which is the sort of, Pennsylvania Dutch magic, was like, yeah, so like you want this wart gone, right? Yeah, do this. Or like, yeah, so you have this burn and you want it to go away. Say this 3 times and wave your hand and it, ta-da. And I could not believe that it could be that simple. You know what I mean? I needed candles. I needed incense. There's no way you just say this phrase and you stop bleeding. And I'd been talking about it with my spirit guide, and he said he was going to test me. I got a nice edition of it. And all of a sudden, one day, I felt this huge pressure in my mouth, and all of a sudden, one of my teeth started bleeding. And I'm like, okay, this is really random. I got to go into the kitchen or the bathroom. So I go in there, and I'm looking at it, and I go, and if I remember the charm correctly, it's I walk through a dark green forest. There I find 3 wells, cool and deep. The first is called courage. The second is called good. And the third is called stop the blood. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. And you make your little sign of the cross. And, you're imagining this as you're saying it. And so I say this very simple thing, and I'm imagining these 3 things 3 times. And to my jaw-dropping amazement, not only did I physically see me stop bleeding, but like the blood sort of almost like go back up into my gum. I like ran out of the bathroom. I told my wife, I'm like, this is, blew me away. I've used a lot of the charms in there for stomach pain for her. I've used one of the charms in there. Remember, spoken word with intent and maybe like some hand motions to twice get something out of my cat's eye. Like if you're someone that's especially coming from like traditional magic, I highly recommend you check it out. Give it a try. It's very much in the Christian realm, but I think you'd really, really get a kick out of it to see how bare bones you can make magic and see what works.
Well, that's interesting for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It seems almost like I guess when it all boils down to it and you look at like chaos, what they call chaos magic and what you were just saying, I mean, it really does all boil down to, and this is one thing I really agree with Crawley with, was it really does basically all boil down to the quote unquote will, you know, and if you truly have that will or that intent behind it and a certain level of belief in the actual process, I think those seem to be the two biggest ingredients, no doubt about it.
I think one of the things is it's the will, and I also think it's resonance. You know what I mean? Because there's some things like, if I was to like pull, if you gave me like a regular Wicca ceremony, I would not be able to pull it off. You know what I mean? I think everybody finds their sort of occult path because it speaks to something within themselves that they say, okay, this is what magic is. You know what I mean? And I think it's not just the resonance in your chosen path, but the materials you use. You know what I mean? For me, an ingredient I use for jinx breaking that, to my knowledge, not a lot of other conjurers do, peppermint. I love to use peppermint because it's not only cleanses, but it's got that sort of spicy ability to break jinxes and keep them off. Everybody's got their specific herbs and everything. So it becomes sort of, again, magic being the spirits, and I totally stole this from Gordon here, but magic being the sort of latent psi phenomena within you, the spirits you interact with, and the local biosphere, whether that's the astrological, the lunar, also the spirits, the land, and everything like that. And then the more magic you do there, the greater the resonance. You know, I have a specific crossroads that I work with that I can go there, and I mean, you can tell when the switch has been flipped. I can go to a regular intersection and the resonance isn't there. I can scream and, you know, try to put my will as much as I want into it, but unless I have that sort of resonance, it's not quite the same. So again, it sort of gives very much that push-pull sort of liquidy universe rather than anything static.
Sure, and you know, that's sort of an argument against just pure unadulterated chaos magic where you could just do anything, but as long as you have an intent behind it, it'll work. Whereas it seems as if you tap into that sort of history of a certain practice, or like you said, use a certain plant that's been used for millennia for that specific purpose, all of a sudden you're tapping into that very deep resonance that goes back. It's just not something you just literally thought of and want to use just because. You know what I mean? There's a history behind, there's a momentum behind it. You know?
And I think, and I stick with the Grimoire people, and especially Jake Stratton Kent with this, that these things also do have real spirits. You know, I have accidentally made a healing bag with valerian root, and the effects were extremely noticeable. My wife was, you know, racked with nightmares, you know, pain, everything. Like, it's interesting. You can sort of, if the wrong ingredient is, it's much like cooking. Like, I think Kat Uronwood really had a good, you know, you can, if you're making pizza, there's plenty of different ways to make pizza, but if you throw like tofu and like duck on it, and then it's also like rolled up and, you know, deep fried, and you're like, yeah, it's Sicilian pizza. It's like, I don't know what the hell I don't know what this is. It may taste good to you, but like, I don't know what this is. You know what I mean? And this doesn't work for me. So I think it's a give and take. I do think there's a lot of will. Chaos magic has proven that. I would be interested, and I don't think there's enough occult research on this. You know, like I've heard a lot of people out of ATRs talk about how, okay, well, when you guys are making these sigils in chaos magic, you know, you are aware, you know, and this is one of the sort of like Quimbunda beliefs. It's like you are aware that you're floating in this constant sea of dead people, right? And so these dead people are like, oh, hey, this looks fun, and they jump into your sigil or they jump into your servitor, and so they make and of course, no one can prove anything. You know, there's no scientific exploration and like, no, this is the way sigils work, or this is the way spirits work. Ultimately, trapped in this realm as we are, we can only make guesses and passes, and it's like, you know, Nietzsche said, you know, there's your truth, there's my truth. As for the truth, it doesn't exist. You know, you have to find your operative truth.
That's deep. I'm gonna have to chew on that one for a minute, because that's something I often wrestle with. But well, Dr. Bones, we're going on 2 hours. We typically only do an hour, but man, you could roll with it, man. So it was a great talk.
Always a pleasure to talk to you guys.
Yeah, seriously, you're born natural when it comes to podcasting, I swear to you. You know, we'd love to have you on again here in the near future. Just one more time, if you want to give a quick plug, you can go for it.
My writings can be found at Gods and Radicals or Disinfo. Disinfo, my series is Gonzo and Conjure, apostrophe 16. There I'll be covering the election all the way down to its apocalyptic and inevitable end when maybe Jesus or Satan rips out of the sky and claims all the souls. And I can be trying to rouse your spirits into insurrection and anarchy over at godsandradicals.com. If you would like to see my large amount of Sterner memes, my regular conversations, or get a hold of me, just go ahead and look at me up on Facebook. It's facebook.com/the Conjure House. I would be more than happy to speak to anyone about really anything.
Okay, great. Well, with that, we were talking with Dr. Bones. I'm Patrick Ryan. He is Eric Scott. We are Free Radical Media. Have a good one.